Good evening, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday, and welcome to Hearts of Europa. I am Lynx, as usual, from Norway, and with me I have Katrina.
Hello, everyone. Hope we're having a good Sunday evening. How are we doing?
I
Yes,
hope,
I'm Katrina and I'm from the UK for anyone who is new. And today we have the theme of elders, or old age, aging in general, which is a
yeah,
topic that crops up in folklore. Definitely.
yeah, it does, and I thought it would be appropriate considering all the talk of our elders these days. As we all know, they have been hit the hardest in these times. So I thought a look on that theme in general would be quite fitting these days.
Absolutely. Because, of course, we all are talking about a concern for our elders these days, but not exactly in a lot of ways acting like it.
Yeah,
Indeed, they've been
exactly.
very, very, very isolated, very lonely, not allowed to see people at a time in life when one should be allowed to see one's family.
Yeah,
The whole situation has been rather terrible for them, I would
definitely.
think.
I heard one story from Canada where this old woman, she was in a retirement home and, full of life, loved everything, and very, very social. And after their first lockdown, she was completely broken down mentally and
Mm.
actually asked for and got euthanasia.
Yeah, and that is the type of thing that this immense amount of social isolation can really do to people. And so many of our old people were also suffering that prior to
Yeah,
lockdown,
yeah,
but so many, many more
exactly.
definitely
Yeah.
are suffering
Uh,
it now.
yeah. Were you saying something more and I managed to interrupt?
Oh no, it's fine. I was finished now.
Okay. Um, but also in these circles, I see it quite a lot with uh, I'm sorry, Luna is on my lap being very cuddly, so she distracted me a bit. But the generational gap and quite a bit of hostility towards our elders. And well, there are things to criticize and point to with older generation. I think it's with many generations and including our own generations. And I really don't like that hostility towards those who gave us life. And I really don't think most of them thought the world would end where it is today. So I really don't like
No,
that hostility. So I
I
thought it
mean,
would be, yeah,
yeah, I have. I'm always in two minds of it. Um, the boomer hate, I can understand why it exists, especially because they then don't seem to realize that the world has changed and the younger generation cannot do certain things as easily as they were able to do them.
mm,
But then everybody becomes somewhat stuck in their ways in their old age quite a lot of the time. And they were people who were trying
yeah,
to do what they thought was best
yeah,
at the time.
exactly.
So I kind of have this resentment of them for living in an unparalleled age of prosperity. But then at the same time, I don't think my parents my parents' generation did. It was maybe more my grandparents.
Yeah.
It's hard to say.
I do get some of the resentment and partially feel it's some of it myself. But I take a step back, and you know, they didn't foresee how the world was going to be, some of the consequences of what they were standing for and everything. You know, it's a slippery slope. So I don't have any bad feelings towards them because of that. Though it's frustrating that they might not understand how things are for the younger generations. The younger generations don't understand their point of view either. So in many cases, I think it's a bit of people being in holding firmly to their stances, and it's not really much communication, just being fueled with anger or something.
It's like I Agree says, they're very naive. I think it was a simpler time that they grew up in, and they can't be naive in that respect. And yeah, the amount of hate towards them though is pretty unwarranted. They're not the sole reason why we are in a mess.
Yeah.
The millennial generation made some bad decisions themselves.
That is definitely something I have observed during my lifetime, and I'm not really even that old, but I've always sort of taken a step back and observed as objectively as I can, and it's definitely that slippery slope where the earlier generation had, for all their faults, they had more of a healthy moral standing point. But that started to slip away as the changes in society took form, in particular that they gave up control of the upbringing of their children. So
well, DDJ's brought up a relevant point of them trying to deal with post-war trauma as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, in many ways it wasn't that simple, actually.
Definitely. Jared George, he does this show with the editor of Arctos Media. I don't remember his name. It's John something. I'm completely blanking on his name right now. But they had a chat with Laura Lee Scaife on the 60s and the 50s. And that is a very interesting talk because, she is of that generation. And she tells of how she witnessed all of that, from growing up in the post-war world. That was a bit of a tongue twister for me because the words are reversed from what they usually are. She pointed out that there was a very plastic feeling to everything, a fake feeling that, basically just plastering on a smile and going on as if this huge disaster hadn't happened. And that was something what they were against, and that is totally understandable from my perspective. It's sort of been of my own mentality. Just growing up and feeling that the world is completely fake, and wanting to eradicate the fakeness, so to speak, when I was more of in a rebellious phase. So it really is a very nuanced picture. But as I agree pointed out in his comment, that the older generation pushing the things we cannot mention on YouTube onto their children, that is really despicable, and that goes to the fear of death. I've seen the same in my own family. For example, my mother, she hasn't been out of the house for over a year until she got her
Wow.
2 little things that shall not be mentioned. And now she has the confidence to go out again. And
Yeah.
she didn't take too kindly to me not wanting to go down the same path. Not hostility, but she made it clear that she didn't like the choice. So
Yeah.
they really do have this, and the generations after them. So, that includes us, have this enormous fear of death.
Pathological fear of death, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We have no conception of what might come after.
Yeah.
So of course we do. But yeah. Do you think, I guess I'm leading on to the theme. I don't know, there's always been, I think there's kind of always been this intergenerational conflict and a slight mistrust of the older generation.
Yeah.
Because there's certainly a lot of sayings in the colloquial vernacular, like you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Mm-hmm.
And an old man who takes a young wife invites death to the wedding, and
Yeah. I have heard that this war between the generations is a new invention, but I'm really not so sure. When we look at stories and everything, there are quite a few stories, and including in several categories. And as we've seen in previous tales we've told, there seems to be this rivalry almost between the generations, and differing between whether it's about men or the women. But when it comes to the man, it's the battle between the father and the son. The son had to fight a bit to be able to stand on his own legs, and at times the father wanting to keep control and putting the son down. Throwing a few wrenches. Yeah. Yeah.
she loves someone her father does not approve of. And quite often she's proven right.
I'm sorry if my audio is breaking up. It's probably the internet connection. Yeah, the internet connection had a drop. And there's not much I can do about that, unfortunately.
Ah, dear. Oh dear.
It does have a dip from time to time, but it's usually on the higher end. So now it should be good.
Interesting way of solving your tech issues, Dan Simon.
I don't think it
I
would
don't
help
think
very
that'd help
much for me.
Oh dear.
I would probably just go off wandering in my mind instead. So
It's someone called Ethelwolf85 says, "Don't know how I got here. Hello and goodbye."
well, hello and
And it's evidence violates community guidelines 3 in the chat.
yeah, thank you. That was not what I was going to say. My mind is
Oh
at the
dear.
point of needing a summer vacation. I was going to say hello. uh,
Oh dear.
I think I might be in need of a brain transplant or something. Or maybe get an external brain to wire up. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh dear.
I really lost my point of thought.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. The mysterious mind of Lynx messing everything up.
Around it which are negative, like there's a lot of sayings I've found from German.
Yeah.
She is the personification of old age. And even Four is told that there has never been, nor ever will be anyone if he grows old enough to become aged who is not tripped up by old age. Because the gods do age, but they are kept immortal by the apples of Idun.
Yeah.
So even the gods are destined to die. So it's a thing. It's linked in with death. You can't escape it. And the Edda also mentions age when it says that the foolish man thinks he'll live forever if he stays away from war, but old age shows him no mercy, though the spears spare him. So I guess it's seen there as relatively pointless to aim to become old. But that fits in with kind of the martial nature of society at that time.
Yeah. There was also I don't remember the place of it, but it's a place in Sweden that is named for back in the day, the elders of the village would go and throw themselves off a cliff. Basically,
Oh yes.
self-sacrificing, and it wasn't out of despair or depression or anything like that, but to spare the younger ones a harsh winter, so that they wouldn't take up excess food.
I definitely also found a tale like that from Iceland as well, with a place called Gilling's Bluff.
Yeah.
And they're talking about how they call it Family Cliff because they use it to cut down the size of the family whenever something extraordinary happens, and the elders are allowed to die straight off without having to suffer any illnesses, and they go straight to Odin.
Yeah. And
there are also other reports of the old and weak being killed in very hard times.
yeah, well, it does make sense.
as
in
well.
times when
Yeah, of course
resources
it does.
were scarce. You can get to the point where you have to think about who you will prioritize. Um, and those who have lived a long life, they are, in a lack for a better word, the obvious choice, and even by their own wish, because they have lived their lives and
Yeah.
want to sacrifice themselves so that the young can survive. So
It usually does seem to be to save people from suffering quite a lot of the time. Like, there's a German legend that the Grimms collected, where a community of fleeing enemy soldiers bury one of their old women alive to keep her from being taken captive. So, and they sort of do this ritualistically as well.
yeah.
And that's to keep her from being taken captive. So this seems to be in the context of exceptional circumstances, or voluntary taking of the sacrifice.
Indeed. I com-
But definitely, yeah, it is obviously a fraught one, because many people would say that, well, many people would say that you shouldn't commit suicide ever, and that's like an affront to God or the gods' creation. But I guess in this way, it seems to have been socially sanctioned, whereas suicide to merely escape suffering
yeah, well, that
was
is
not.
two different topics, so to speak. While,
Yes, correct.
most cultures have seen it heroic to sacrifice yourself by meeting an enemy in the field, for example, to keep the others safe. And you could see starvation and the harsh winter and everything in the same light. It is an enemy. It is your opponent, and you are giving your
Yeah.
life to keep the others safe. That isn't suicide per se, I would say.
No, true. But it also does have the side of allowing them to escape that suffering as well. So
Yeah,
it's kind of a double thing. But obviously, people had to make very tough decisions. I do not get the impression that this was
no,
at all done casually.
I don't think it was anything done casually at all. I think they had more reverence both towards life and death than we have these days.
Hmm. No, I would say you're correct there. I mean, that's one aspect that definitely does crop up in some folk tales, actually, the killing of old people. And then I guess there's a few archetypes. There's a lot of archetypes about wise old people, but there's also a lot of demonic personages who are represented by age. Definitely. I mean, we tend to get wise old man, or foolish, grumpy old man, or with women, evil crone, and
Mm-hmm.
wise woman. So I guess that's, again, we're talking about the positive and the shadow of both genders. at that stage of
Yeah.
life.
While in many ways, many stories deal more with the shadowy side of the elders. I definitely feel that the wise old man or wise old woman is a balance to that, in that it really shows the reverence for wisdom, and you only get that with age and experience.
Mm. Yes. But at the same time, maybe in an age where I think especially in the medieval times in cities, people didn't live long. So I guess there's also a distrust for people who somehow managed to live past 60 something. Because people are not quite sure how they did it.
I suppose that depends on when you think people really died. I'm not sure because what mostly drags the average lifespan down is the high child mortality rate. And when you see, when you look
Yes,
at records, you can see that people actually lived quite long.
I suppose if you were to talk to someone like Dutton about it, um, then that sort of a person looking at it from that perspective would say yes, lots of very sickly people who were not viable died young, but the rest of the people were healthy and lived quite long lives.
It's like one myth about how bad people's teeth were back in the day, when actually they weren't. They were very strong. When they have been digging up medieval skeletons in Norway, for example, unless they had some dental disease, then their teeth was very healthy. But what we see in more popular media and everything is that people were basically toothless by the age of 30. And also looking like an old hag, for example. So I do think some images really have been exaggerated in our times about how bad things really were, but they don't. Well, in one
Yeah.
way, today's nutrition is way better. It's also has a lack of nutrition, for example. Back then,
Wasn't there studies to indicate that
oh
food
yeah,
had gotten less nutritious? Like an apple had
yeah.
gotten less nutritious.
Basically, all of our food has less nutrition because of soil depletion. Um, with modern farming, you are really dependent on fertilization and everything, and it really doesn't replenish the soil because they don't leave anything fallow anymore like they would back in the day. And that is really needed to keep the soil replenished. So all in all, we do need to go back
That's
to
true.
the older ways, also in that way.
Yeah,
Yeah, and also
agriculture,
with
yeah.
all the GMO stuff, that is really bad for you and bad for the soil and bad for nature and everything. So yeah, we really have a big cleaning up job to do there.
Yeah, Yankee Apple reckons if you survived past 4 years old, your chances of
Yeah.
surviving past 80 were excellent. I've not really looked too much into the sources on that. It'd be
Yeah,
interesting.
well, yeah, I would agree
would
with
be
the
interesting.
general concept, though I don't know if it was past 80 or something a bit less. But
People tend to consider 70 the natural lifespan for a lot of history.
uh, I think that depends on how far back you go and which sources you see. There are some indications to say that the natural lifespan of a human is about 120 or something, but that it is decreased over the centuries. Yeah,
Whoa, that's a long time.
it's a long time since I heard that. But as I say, so I don't really remember what it was based on, but some sources really do tell of long lifespans, but some might be, the Sumerian kings list and everything, and they can be a bit hard to determine. Basically, all of the ancient kings lists say people ruled for centuries or something, so it's a bit hard to determine.
Yeah. I think Eliada was talking about that, and that it might not have been literal, but measured in terms of what actually happened
Who talked about that?
in their reign. Mircea Eliade?
I
think he
don't
was
remember
talking
that
about
name,
that.
so I don't know who that is.
That was the guy with the myth of the eternal return.
Okay.
He crops up occasionally. Good stuff. Evola, but less
Yeah.
wordy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even when you look at known historical figures, they seem to live to quite a ripe old age. Though they were often royal, so that might have something to do with it. Better food and everything.
That's quite true. Yes.
There are some who think that for some reason our genome turns off at a certain age, and it really doesn't have to do that. So it's hard to say. There's so many theories around that, and it's a bit hard to differentiate actual research with high octane speculation.
Certainly, yeah.
As I do tend to like the high octane speculation bit, so yeah.
It's fun.
At least it's an exercise of imagination.
But, of course, yeah.
Yes, we
should probably have a story.
Oh,
we are 45
time flies.
minutes in.
We were...
So, yeah.
Yeah?
I think,
the
what
cudgel.
were we starting with again? Yes. That was it. So, yeah, this is a story from Germany about less than grateful children.
Indeed.
The Cudgel, Germany. A wealthy man had 3 daughters. He gave them marriage dowries and provided for their every need. But then he lived too long for them. They begged him to deed his property to them, promising that in return they would care for him the rest of his life. They would provide him with his own room and give him the best things to eat and drink. So the father deeded his property to them, and during the first year all went well. But the next year, when he spent more time with the one daughter than with the others, she said to him, "Father, you are a burden to me. Go to the others. They received just as much from you as I did." The good father could very well see that he was no longer wanted, and asked a neighbour for advice. The neighbour gave him an old chest filled with sand and stones. The father had the chest carried to where he was staying, and then asked his daughter to lend him a scoop and 3 candles, for he had something that he wanted to measure. He sat up half the night making a clinging sound, as if there were gold coins. The next morning he gave the scoop back to the daughter, leaving 1 old Bohemian coin in it. She said, "Father, you were clinging in the night, as if you were measuring gold coins. I heard it. He said, I set aside some money for myself in a chest. I am going to leave it to the one of you who is most friendly toward me. Hearing this, all three wanted to have him, and each one tried to outdo the others in caring for him. When his time finally came to die, they went to the chest and discovered it was filled with sand and stones, together with a cudgel, upon which was written in the English language, "Be it known to all the world that anyone should be beaten with this cudgel, who gives so much to his children that he himself suffers want."
So, that was the story of ungrateful children. There was quite a few versions of that, if I remember correctly. So it does seem to have been a fairly common theme, at least in some parts, of children being a bit impatient with getting their inheritance.
And that's certainly, most of the time, an old person, usually a father, has to trick their children into giving them care. So there's one from India where an old man's divided his property among his sons, but he didn't die, and his sons now treat him cruelly. Then he's got 4 bags of gravel, pretended they had money he'd received from payment of an old debt, and then they're
The cudgel.
paying attention to him, paying
Germany.
attention to his every need, making every effort to please him. And there's a version of this in Winterton, in England as well, very similar to the German version. And it also kind of crops up as well, having to use guile to get any standard of life in animal fables as well. Because there's stories about a faithful dog, which was now too old to be of any use. But the dog has a friend, the wolf, and so the wolf pretends to seize the master's child, and the dog pursues and pretends to struggle with the wolf and rescues the child. So now the farmer's grateful and promises to keep the dog for the rest of his life. I mean, we kind of had it as well in the Bremen Town Musicians. Those were all old abandoned animals, and they basically had to use their head to get any good standard of life for themselves. They had to trick people.
Yeah.
And there's so there's certainly a theme of young people's natural affection for their parents or their elders not really being enough to incite them to care for them, or faithful companions being ill-used and abandoned. And the folktales definitely seem to take a stance against this, like they're socially shaming people who do this, who abandon those who've been reliable and helped them in their time of need, in their old age. And there's another type of tale that you get where there is an old person in the house doing something annoying. So the mother and father of the house send them away. But then the son in the house is seen to be thinking of the parents in their old age doing the same thing. Like for example, a man has a father who's grown too old to do anything but eat and smoke. So the man decides to send him away with nothing but a blanket. And just give him half a blanket, says the man's son from his cradle. Then I'll have half to give to you when you grow old, and I send you away. And then upon hearing this, the man quickly reconsidered and allowed his old father to remain after all. So I guess there's a cynical view that there's a degree of self-interest about, what example am I going to set? Who's going to take care of me when I'm old? And that's why you should take care of the elderly. If you can't do it out of the goodness of your heart, Which is an interesting one there.
Yeah, these kinds of tales do definitely bring to mind what is so often said these days, that the retirement plan for they had back in the day were children. But as we can see with these tales, that plan wasn't always foolproof. There seems to have been some issues popping up now and again. So yeah.
Absolutely. No, it is an old problem. Who gets the task of looking after the aged relative? Because there is references to. There was a story I read about a raven who's carrying his chicks across the sea. And he says to them when they're on his back, which one of you's gonna carry me when I'm old? And one of them says, oh, I'll carry you when you're old, father. And the raven was like, yeah, and drops him into the sea. And then the other one says, no, I'll definitely carry you when you're old, father. And the raven's like, and drops him into the sea. So he gets the third chick, and the third chick, he asks him, so who's going to carry me when I'm old then? And the third chick says, well, not me. I'll have my own family by that time, so you'll have to fend for yourself. And then he says, well, you were honest. And carries him across the sea. So there's that I can't remember where that was from, but it is European. And it's that very cynical view of being a parent can be somewhat of a thankless job. Sometimes you don't really do it for the sake of getting anything back. And that you put your energy into developing the young rather than constantly looking after the old.
Yeah, well,
I feel like we have a dual mentality these days of caring too much and not enough about the old. We care how long they live for. We don't really care if it has any quality.
Yeah, and not being willing to take on the challenges of that, but instead place them in a home. I do understand it when the task is too much physically for someone. I know of one man who had to go into a nursing home after he had a stroke. But the alternative was that he was living at home with his wife, and he was a really big guy, and she is a very small woman. So, you know, her helping him onto the toilet and everything, you know, he had a really big damage
Yeah.
to his brain. So if that was to work, she would have to have help in the home 24 hours a day. Of course, that might have been a bit different if, you know, their children, one of their children had lived with them, but, you know, they had their own places. And that wasn't an option for various reasons. So, or if there's someone with Alzheimer's or something, it can be really hard to keep track of them, you know, because they tend to run away and everything. And when today people are mainly working away from home, which they didn't back in the day, you know, where then it was very much in-house, everything. So it does become a challenge if you are away at work all day. You know, what are you going to do then? And then you come home from work and you are exhausted, and some might think that the children is enough to deal with, and not having not to be derogatory, but someone who is basically a child mentally, but in a grown body. So, you know, it is difficult.
Yes. And not having the traditional family structure anymore quite often means that nobody is free to take care of someone like that. And you don't have a community network around you of people who would look out for them anymore. So for many people, it's just too much. I'm really sorry to hear that, Stephen. That is
So am I.
indeed very sad.
It really is a horrible disease. Yeah.
Very much so. What else is going on? Ruffian reckons that being a parent is often thankless. Oh, no doubt.
It is. I'm sort of
ungrateful little brats.
I'm a bit.
Hello, Ruffian, by the way.
I'm a bit of the opinion, just my personal opinion, that when you have children, you owe them everything, and they don't owe you anything, basically. So,
I think they, well, if you are a good parent to them, they owe you some respect.
If you have a proper relation,
you fulfill your obligations.
If you have fulfilled your obligation as a parent, your children will want to have contact with you. You have earned their respect and everything. And I don't say what I said in terms of lack of respect, but with the importance I put on being a parent. I consider that task the largest one can take on your shoulders, and we really need to be conscious of that. So when you choose to have children, you owe them everything, because it is your choice. It's not theirs.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so we have gone from dating
going on here?
advice to parenting advice.
Parenting advice. I'm not qualified for that. I mean, give us a couple of years, then I might be. Um, but oh, good to hear. Ruffian's kid respects him. This is good.
Yeah.
Respectful children.
Well, it goes to that for the most part, what you put into something is what you will get in return. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Hopes he never sees 70. I mean, well, depends what health condition you're in, isn't it? I think that the Japanese and Chinese old people that were mentioned earlier, they tend to keep themselves in quite good physical nick, and when you're 70 and not someone who's got a whole lot of health problems, probably a fairly relaxing time of life. But if you've gotten to 70 and have a whole bunch of health problems, then that's going to be significantly
yeah.
less good for you.
I basically don't want to die riddled with illness, and fingers crossed I will go quickly. My grandmother, she just fell over. Her heart just stopped. So she was basically dead before she hit the floor. So, and she was she was
That's the way
in
to
fairly
go.
good health when it happened as well. So, and at an advanced age. So, I think that should be what you should aim for. And, not aim for a certain amount of years, but a certain amount of health is what I'm thinking.
I would say so too.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. What story were we gonna have next? We had the cudgel,
It was
and
the
then
old man.
we had yes, talking about aiming for numbers of years. The old man and the three young men. I think maybe touches upon the
Okay,
theme.
let's hear that one.
The Old Man and the Three Young Men. La Fontaine. An old man planting a tree was met by 3 joyous youths at the village near, who cried, "It is dotage a tree to set. Add your years, sir, for it will not bear. Unless you reach Methuselah's age, to build a tomb were much more sage. But why, in any case, burden your days with care for other people's enjoyment? 'Tis for you to repent of your evil ways. To care for the future is our employment." Then the aged man replies, "All slowly grows, but quickly dies. It matters not if then or now you die or I, we all must bow. Soon, soon before the destinies. And tell me which of you, I pray, is sure to see another day, or whether in the youngest shall survive this moment's interval. My great-grandchildren, ages hence, shall bless this tree's benevolence. And if you seek to make it plain that pleasing others is no gain, I, for my part, truly say, I taste this tree's ripe fruit today, and hope to do so often yet. Nor should I be surprised to see, though truly with sincere regret, the sunrise gild you tombstones 3. These words were stern but bitter truths. For one of these adventurous youths, intent to seek a distant land, was drowned just as he left the strand. The second, filled with martial zeal, bore weapons with a common weal, and in a battle met the lot of falling by a random shot. The third one from a tree-top fell and broke his neck. The old sage then, weeping for the 3 young men, upon their tomb wrote what I tell.
Yes, that was certainly a poem with which tells of the amount of life you get, and how fast it can disappear. You know, when you're young, you really think, you know, you have decades and decades before you. But as I think most of us have seen, it doesn't always happen. You might actually just have a short time left.
And it's also about what really struck me was the mistakenness of the youth when they thought that there was no hope in old age. But actually, contrary to the opinions of these youths, one should still be thinking about the future in old age. And that man lives on by this very symbolic tree that he's planted, which bore fruit, which is going to be tasted for generations and generations to come. Whereas these three young men, who threw themselves entirely into the now, I guess, they threw their lives away on various pointless errands.
Yeah, I would say that for the first two, but maybe not for the last one who fell off a tree, which definitely reminded me of.
That
That was
just
dumb luck. It did remind me of Friends in Life and Death, with a guy who went to heaven for 400 years, and when he came back as an old man, he climbed an oak and fell down and broke his neck and died. So I suppose that was a bit too adventurous a spirit as well.
Yeah, I guess the overall moral of the poem is don't mock the old, and don't be complacent with the life you've got, because you never know if you're next. So I guess be thinking about what sort of legacy you'll leave behind you as well, like that old man was with his tree.
You know, there is a balance in living in the now and thinking of the future. You know, if you live too much in the now, you really just, for the most part, end up being very materialistic. Yeah, very short-sighted, materialistic, and I suppose quite selfish as well. Maybe even hedonistic, because you know, the future doesn't exist at all. And you know, it hasn't happened yet, but it's still something to have in mind, and do your best to plan for the future.
Exactly, yeah. But I guess it comes into this poem a little bit more the attitude of respect for old people. And I've totally forgotten what I was going to say. But yeah, this is definitely an example of old people's superior wisdom, and there's a few stories of that type about. There's a specific genre actually about why we don't kill old people anymore, and this is usually because the old person has provided actually wisdom, and they've shown themselves to be more valuable than a number of young people in some respect. Like, there's one from Ukraine called "Why People Today Die Their Own Death," and then it says once it was that old people were killed, and when a person got old, they'd take him and kill him. So those guys in the poem were saying it'd be more appropriate to build yourself a tomb, just go away and die. And they say of an old man, he's old. What good is he? Why should we feed him bread for nothing? But one son takes pity on his father, and instead of killing him as required by the law, hides him in a cellar and continues to feed him. And a famine came to the land, and the people ate all the stored grain, even that which had been set aside for seed. And the old father says, thresh the straw from the roof, because that will have seed, and plant the seed gleaned from that. And the son did as he was advised, and the seed grew up immediately and fed everyone. And so everyone saw that the old man actually had wisdom and God's blessing, and so they abolished the law which said you had to kill old people and stopped seeing them as purely a burden. So I guess what the old passed down is also knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a legacy as to why you should value the aged.
Yeah, well, they have experience. And, why invent the wheel twice?
Well, that is a saying. If an old man lacks knowledge, at least he has experience. And there is wisdom in age.
Well, I do think knowledge and experience sort of equal wisdom to a point. At least they are major.
Old men can see backwards better than a young man can see forwards. So they've already seen a thing happen. They know what to do.
Yeah, that really reminds me of the saying in these times with been there, done that. And that is basically just 100% experience, but maybe not learning so much from it. More chasing experiences. So, well, hopefully people have learned from what they've done.
Hopefully, indeed. I mean, you see people who haven't. You see people who somehow manage to be old and foolish. And this is quite a common trope. Folklore definitely recognizes the existence of them. But, quite a lot of old people have a lot of knowledge to offer and a lot of experiences.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I just got distracted by the chat with the paradox. Is this because this is becoming the cute cat show? So I had to see what.
Always
of course.
Has been. Fantastic.
I just had to see what that came from.
Aw.
Yeah, that is
with a
sweet.
kitten. That's nice. Aw. What's up? What's YouTube up to? Not much. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well,
but yeah,
we do.
We like the kitties.
I have been known for being a bit of a cat fanatic, as a childhood friend of mine said some years back.
A bit, yes.
Slightly. I've
Slightly.
always loved cats, but I do have the presence of mind enough to realize that I might have crazy cat lady tendencies, and so keep them in check. If you're aware that there is a potential problem, you can avoid it.
Yeah.
So I
just have a totally unabated love for dogs. I love them. I will not hear a bad word said about dogs.
don't become a crazy dog woman. Yeah, good.
Not intending on it, no. But
They
I would like
are
to have
cute.
a dog.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. But yeah, I guess old age, the subject really leads on to something we'd already talked about, which is death and the cycle of life and accepting death,
Yeah.
which is definitely something we
That
struggle
is
with today.
Yeah, that is
As we have
definitely a
mentioned.
question that has been brought to the forefront this this past year. I just wish that more would actually reflect on it instead of just running from it. Because there's only one thing in life that is for sure,
Yeah.
and that is that one day you will die. And I don't really think that is something we should be scared of. It's basically the only thing we just have to accept.
Well, it's definitely not something we should all lock ourselves in our houses in order to avoid the slightest
No.
possibility of. Which is basically what we
Yeah.
have done.
Don't hug your grandkids because they might kill you. Sort of arguments, which is just
They might kill you at the tragically
Yeah.
young age of 83.
The psychological warfare that's been going on is just mind-boggling.
It has, absolutely. And I think it's because we seem to live in a world where we think it an injustice when everyone is not constantly protected from every form of harm. Ever. And we've lost the mechanisms to deal with death and the time for it. Like, I was reading about rituals that people used to have of, opening the doors or the windows for the soul, or stopping up places in the house, filling the hollow space in the house so the soul couldn't hide. You know, having a scrap from the person who's dying's clothing, the rituals surrounding it's the time to go now. We acknowledge that this person's soul has to leave, and we are going to prepare, their path to the afterlife.
Yeah,
We had more rituals surrounding, that then we could have some surety about where our loved ones were going and what was happening. And of course, people killed their own animals and stuff and everything else. They knew about death.
Also, that these days the deceased is in a funeral home, whereas in the old days they would be in the house. I don't remember the English word for it, but the Norwegian is likstrå. Well, it might not have been in the actual house. It might have been in the barn or something. Of course, somewhere where the mice and such can come to the body, of course. But they were basically around the deceased person or the body for about a week or something. And as you say, they had several rituals connected to that. And
the paradox says it's a laying out in English, which rings a bell with me.
Yeah.
I think that might be the correct answer.
The paradox also said earlier that death only happens once, and that is true. But the point is that we then had a more natural relationship with death, and also then with life. It wasn't as artificial as it is now. Not only is there this enormous fear of death, but it's chasing after not only youth, but in almost the teenage years, that people want to stay teenagers for like forever. I read this opinion piece or parts of it a couple of years back, and the woman who wrote it wrote, I'm 29 years old now, so I'm starting to grow up. Excuse me, you should have grown up about 10 years ago. Is this...
Well, it's quite another topic, but we lack demarcating sort of ceremonies. We lack initiatory rites for becoming an adult, and everybody feels unsure, especially because they can't get their own property and they can't get their own independence. So you see a lot of my sort of generation, people in their 30s, people in their 20s, still not considering themselves adults because they don't have the markers of adulthood that their parents would have had.
And
they don't see a future, so they spend their money on Funko Pops and Harry Potter
and also
memorabilia.
Back in the day you had to grow up fairly early, but today the pressures are very different, so you can basically stay in a perpetual childish state because how to put it, it's not that there's not any challenge to life anymore. The challenges are very different, and it's no longer so much a case of pure survival, or
it's a case of resisting a lot of temptations.
Yeah.
Constantly. Like there's pressure to go out and be as hedonistic as you possibly can.
Yeah, because you have to savor these years before something or another. The years in college, the years before you get married, the years before something, and it just sort of snowball into suddenly you find yourself at 40 or something and just, where did my life go? So it's
there's a constant fear of missing out on fun stuff that causes people to endlessly defer settling down to doing something sensible.
It's basically chasing experiences. you have to experience this, you have to experience that, and I think it's also tied to your rootlessness. But I suppose this is a whole other topic. Seriously.
And the constant stream of everybody else's experiences being pumped into your face on social media as well. Oh, right. Steven's had 5 kids, 3 cats, and 1 Alaskan Malamute.
Yeah.
Sounds like a handful. Oh dear. Alaskan Malamutes are like huge. They're so fluffy and huge. I want an Alaskan Malamute.
Why not?
But I probably could never have one. Because how much do you have to feed them things? And it could drag me across the park.
Isn't that what you
It
should
could.
have a strong man for?
It's true. Probably could handle it. But, yeah. I don't know. Initially, for dog owning, I might start off with something
Yeah.
smaller. Like a sausage dog.
There was one lady living in the area where I grew up in, and that family always had dogs. And it always looked like the dogs were walking the lady instead of the lady walking the dogs. Because she's this tiny little lady, and the dogs are straining on the leashes, and everything is basically just dragging her along. But
I looked after a terrier that practically took me for a walk, never mind.
In her defense, she never lost
mad.
control of them, so yeah, I think it was more how it looked than how it actually was. But I can see how a huge dog can be a bit of a problem.
Oh. The big dogs are always quite friendly, aren't they? Like for the most part. It seems like with dogs, the smaller ones feel like they have something to prove. The big ones are usually pretty chill.
I don't really know much. Yeah. I
Depends
don't
on
know
the dog,
why, but for some reason, if I do have a dog, I would like to have a Doberman or something. I'm not sure why, because I've never I've never met a Doberman or anything, but there's just something about them that I find really attractive. But of course it would have to be a very disciplined Doberman. So
I kind of hope to meet a Caucasian Shepherd. They're huge.
I haven't
Huge
heard of
and
those.
fluffy.
And
European.
Yeah, I did.
Caucasian Mountain Shepherd. Yeah, they're absolute giants. They look like a lion.
I have seen wolf dogs, or what they're called. They are gargantuan, very very thin, but very very tall. They look kind of weird.
We've gotten a bit sidetracked by dogs.
I would say so.
It's a good topic.
Yeah. Starting up a dog channel or something. Dogs and cats.
Could do. I mean, I don't know how to train dogs though.
Neither do I. Yeah, I have heard dog trainers say that scaringly many dog owners choose the wrong dog for themselves, the wrong breed. So
yeah. Well, that's something that, you know, can't have a dog that's going to have any sort of bad temperament issues, because when you have kids, it could be very, very dangerous.
I do think many think of that aspect, but what I have come to see more is a problem of barking a lot and not really having control of them, and that is basically a lack of leadership on the human part.
I've seen that very often.
That might be a question of the breed they are choosing, more than not being able to have a dog, but they have a breed that they aren't able to give a proper life.
Also, people these days, they have some conception that you can't be mean to be kind.
Yeah.
They do it with kids as well. Like, there's this overemphasis on always being nice, but niceness is not always what is needed. Sometimes you have to, tell someone what is happening.
Yeah.
And explain to them that you didn't mean it personally later.
Yeah.
We can't with the dog, but the dog's looking for an answer.
The paradox: you train a dog, a cat trains you. That is quite true. I used to be very strict with Luna, but I had to find a temperate home. She had to live somewhere else temporarily. And when we got reunited, I lost my strong touch with her because I felt so bad. So you can train a cat. It just doesn't work like it does with dogs for the most part. So
lol. Steven is seeing more of his cat.
They do like to show off their those certain parts for some reason. But I think that might be a bit of an issue with anatomy more than anything else. So yeah, getting back to our elders. Should we listen to the last story of tonight?
Yeah, let's listen to the last story.
It is a bit of a
tonight.
weird one, so...
That is...
Yeah.
It was quite weird. I did think
you did point out some things that I hadn't thought of before, so we might have an interesting discussion on that after we have a listen. So
Indeed.
Here we go. The seventh father of the house. Once upon a time there was a man who was travelling about, and he came at length to a big and fine farm. There was such a fine manor house there that it might as well have been a little castle. It would be a nice thing to get a night's rest here, said the man to himself upon entering the gate. Close by stood an old man with grey hair and beard, chopping wood. Good evening, father, said the traveller. Can I get lodgings here tonight? I am not the father of the house, said the old man. Go into the kitchen and speak to my father. The traveller went into the kitchen. There he met a man who was still older, and he was lying on his knees in front of the hearth, blowing into the fire. Good evening, father. Can I get lodgings here tonight? Asked the traveller. I am not the father of the house, said the old man. But go in and speak to my father. He is sitting at a table in the parlour. So the traveller went into the parlour and spoke to him who was sitting at the table. He was much older than the other two, and he sat there with clattering teeth, shaking and reading a big book, almost like a child. Good evening, father. Can you give me lodgings here tonight? Said the man. I am not the father of the house, but speak to my father over there. He is sitting on the bench, said the man who was sitting at a table with clattering teeth and shaking and shivering. So the traveller went to him who was sitting on the bench. He was getting a pipe of tobacco ready, but he was so bent with age, and his hands shook so much that he was scarcely able to hold the pipe. Good evening, father, said the traveller again. Can I get lodgings here tonight? I am not the father of the house, said the old bent-over man, but speak to my father, who is in the bed over yonder. The traveller went to the bed, and there lay an old man, and the only thing about him that seemed to be alive was a pair of big eyes. Good evening, father. Can I get lodgings here tonight? Said the traveller. I am not the father of the house, but speak to my father, who lies in the cradle yonder, said the man with the big eyes. Yes, the traveller went to the cradle. There was a very old man lying, so shriveled up that he was not larger than a baby, and one could not have told that there was life in him if it had not been for a sound in his throat now and then. Good evening, father. Can I get lodgings here tonight? Said the man. It took some time before he got an answer, and still longer before he had finished it. He said, like the others, that he was not the father of the house, but speak to my father. He is hanging up in the horn on the wall there. The traveller stared around the walls, and at last he caught sight of the horn. But then he looked for him who hung in it. There was scarcely anything to be seen but a lump of white ashes, which had the appearance of a man's face. He was so frightened that he cried aloud, Good evening, father. Will you give me lodgings here tonight? There was a sound like a little tomtit's chirping, and he was barely able to understand that it meant, Yes, my child. And now a table come in, which was covered with the costliest dishes, with ale and brandy. And when he had eaten and drunk, in came a good bed with reindeer skins, and the traveller was very glad indeed that he had at last found the true father of the house. Quite an odd story, wouldn't they say? It was one of the stories I grew up with, so it's one of those that carries many memories for me. It was read countless times in daycare and at home and everything, and we had this Italian guy who lived here. I'm not sure if he immigrated himself or if it was his parents. His name was Ivo Caprino, and he turned several of our stories into what's it called when they use puppets? With strings and everything. But he turned several of those stories into movies like that. And it's created a theme park at Lillehammer with a museum with that. It's just outside Lillehammer. It's called Hunderfossen. And I try to remember the English title of his most known movie. I can't remember it. I learned of it this winter, actually. It's with this cycle repair guy who enters into the Grand Prix, with cars and everything, and it's of course a lot of drama. But he made a video of this story, so that was on TV all of the time. So yeah, a lot of memories.
Yeah. So a very, very well known one, because when I first read it, and this is, I guess, because it strikes me that nobody in that house, despite being an impossibly old age, seemed to have died. So they just seemed to be continuing without dying, but in consciousness. still, and I thought that was it was kind of creepy. It was weird. It was a weird sort of image of this man who's so ancient he's like literally skin, but still alive.
Not skin, but ashes.
He's ashes and a conscious but ashes. I was like, that is some kind of Cronenberg level body horror. That is, imagine being cognizant of the fact that you're ashes. I was just like, freaky.
I couldn't remember that being ashes from when I was a kid, when I reread it as an adult, so I must have missed that point. Or at least it didn't stay in my mind, but as you saw from the picture I used, that was the picture. That's how all of the illustrations are, not only from Ivo Caprino, but with any other illustration I've seen. So mentally, the image of cognizant ashes didn't stick in my mind. And
no, I suppose you don't think about it like that. But it's interesting symbology as well, with the horn and ashes. And then he generates all this. He's the one who has the power to generate all this food and stuff.
I also think it's
so maybe it's process of decay and regrowth.
I do think the image of the older they get, the smaller and more childlike they get. Not mentally, but physically. So it's it gives an interesting perspective of the circle of life.
It seems to be, I don't know, ashes and with the head poking out like that, if that's how it was. It gives me the phoenix connotations.
Yeah.
The resurrection.
Absolutely. The main point I take from the story is revelation of your father and your line. And taking that thought into our days, it's in so many ways just really putting our backs to our ancestors, which I really object to. It's a disregard for every generation that has come before us, basically. With the anti-white narrative, it's hate your ancestors and hate yourself for being their descendant.
Yes.
And that is just so completely wrong. It really
entirely
rubs me the wrong way. It makes me so angry. And this tale really shows that you have to find the authority, the proper authority, and that is your father, and his father, and his father, going back the generations.
Yeah. And that is what justifies whether you can stay there.
In
that house.
They leave it to.
Do you have the blessing of the fathers of the fathers of the fathers?
Having the blessing of the father is a very important concept in our cultures. When you wanted to take a bride, you had to get your father's blessing and permission. And in many cases, you also had to have the blessing and permission of your own parents. So it wasn't willy-nilly, because it's, keeping your line alive and dealing with your inheritance in a respectful manner, in a thoughtful manner. So it really shows this interconnectedness between the generation in give and take, so to speak. You don't just give and you don't just take. It's a constant back and forth between an equilibrium. So the goal should be to keep as close to the equilibrium as possible. And I think that is what many of these stories are telling us. In particular with the ungrateful children and everything. So I do think that is something with this story as well. And with the men growing smaller as they grow older, in one way you could see it as an inversion of life. What was that movie with the guy who was born really old and got younger and younger and younger?
I don't know. I'm very bad at films, though.
I haven't
terrible.
seen the movie. I think I've only seen parts of it. I found it quite boring, actually. But it sort of takes my mind to that with this story. You know, Benjamin Button. Yeah, that was it. So he's basically born as a very old man and dies as a baby. But for me, it really takes my mind to the circle of life in that it's not just a sickbed. It's a cradle. It's a bed, and more of a symbology of children. So it isn't really just flipped on his head, in my mind at least. It's a bit hard to put words to it.
Well, it's sort of it's like from Shakespeare, the monologue from As You Like It, and he's talking about the 7 ages of life, and in the last one, you know, he talks about turning again towards childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all that ends this strange eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion.
Mm.
So it's quite widespread, that perception of old age really coming back round full circle to the helplessness of being a baby again.
That is something that is pointed out several times. Isn't there some sort of saying that your parents change your diaper, and when their time comes, you will change their diaper?
I feel like, it might relate to something like that, or feeding them, or something like that. I've heard variants, definitely, but yeah, it's a scary thing for a lot of people to contemplate, because you once again become so reliant.
You know, you spend the first time of your life working to become independent. So when that is reversed and you become dependent again, you also have to give up control, and that is very difficult for many people, myself included.
Oh yeah. No, older relatives of mine have struggled immensely with
Yeah.
accepting that they need help because you get used to not needing help. And it's very much a, a hard thing to people to accept that they can't do things like they used to do. And I think there's increasing resistance to it these days when we don't have a conception that we don't have a conception of the proper role of the elderly, and we're
Yeah.
so youth focused. You know, you see people who are very, very, very obsessed with
Yeah.
maintaining youthfulness. And so
Oh,
age
definitely.
terrifies a lot of people.
I had a bout of illness a few years back, and that included needing some help with a few things, and that was very hard to accept and ask for and receive and everything. So I definitely know how hard that is. And when you've been independent for the vast majority of your life, which I hadn't at that point in my life, it's a few years back now, that feeling must become even stronger. If you've been independent, and with that generation, they started their independence really by 20 years or even earlier.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was possible. They could get a job, they could
Not
get a
only
house
possible,
and
but they
stuff
had
like that.
to.
Yeah.
It was the only choice.
They did.
Yeah.
There was no excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't all of these programs and everything that we have today to help people back on their feet and everything. If you wanted to live your life, you had to get a job. You had to get up and go to work. You basically had to work your asses off in many cases, in particular in the lower paid jobs. So, there you didn't have a choice at all. And then coming to the point where you are unable to take care of yourself, after maybe 60 years of that must be hard. That must be really hard. Yeah.
It must be.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it must be. Check in the chat. Illuminatus says Quizwe keeps the memory active. Yes, I think Illuminatus does a quiz. And I agree. Says, would Woden accept me into Valhalla? Even in my old age, I declare war on boss, going at full speed, and charge it with my cane. That's a and that'd be an ecumenical matter. That possibly push it to Dave Martell. I don't know how to answer such a theological question.
I do suspect that Woden would see through your real intention there, so maybe not. I generally don't have a quarrel with bosses,
But if you die in a fight in the nursing home, you might admire your spunk.
That might qualify. With the perspective of how that sector is going, you might have to. So. I'm not going to.
Yes.
What?
Picked up on the Father Ted quote there. I agree. It was picked up on the Father Ted quote there. That would be an ecumenical matter. That would be an ecumenical. Yes,
That is
quite.
something I don't know of, unfortunately, so
Oh.
I didn't pick up on that. Yeah.
British things.
I do think the ashes of the story is quite interesting. In one way, it takes my mind to from ashes to ashes, from dust to dust.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
it really does take my mind to, again, the circle of life, and that you will return to the earth, basically. But it also took my mind to monatomic gold. And I don't remember if that is connected with prolonged life or not. It is. It does have an effect on your mental capabilities. Your your thoughts become clearer, and it does have a positive effect on your health. It's somewhat similar to colloidal silver, I think. You can get colloidal gold as well. And that is used to colloidal silver is to strengthen the immune system and help keeping you healthy. And colloidal gold has the same properties, but it also clears your mind. So it has that mental effect as well. And I don't remember if it's in the Bible. I think it is, but it is in The Life of Brian with eating gold. Brian's mother starts with all the gold that I can eat and everything. And I do think that is a reference to the Bible of eating gold. And it is one theory is that they talk about monatomic gold in that, and the benefits of that.
Yeah. Sounds like an expensive supplement.
Only for
Certainly.
the rich, literally.
But apparently it can be found in foods that are red. Like
Monatomic
salmon.
gold?
Huh. Well, I eat lots of salmon.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, apparently. I suppose there's small trace elements of minerals in a lot of things. I'll have to look into that. I mean, I eat a lot of salmon. I like salmon a lot. So if that's true, good for me. I've been consuming microscopic amounts of gold.
Yeah. I don't like fish,
Very
so I
fancy.
don't consume much of it, to say the least. But I thought they were just full of mercury, as all fish are.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's a different topic.
Well,
Yeah.
some more than others. Some more than others. I mean, I come from an island nation, Lynx. I like fish. I think it would be a shame to live on these isles and not like fish.
With the exception of 1 year, I have lived my entire life by one fjord or another, and that year I didn't live by a fjord. I lived by the sea, and I still don't eat fish.
That is a shame. You live where you can get fresh fish. It is one of the best things.
Well,
I think. I greatly appreciate fish. Not all types of fish. Mackerels,
with the food availability and everything, I definitely would like to like fish, but so far I haven't tasted a fish that doesn't taste like fish, and I don't like the taste of fish, so...
Even the, really just plain
they still
white fish.
taste like fish. Yeah.
Still taste like fish. Yeah. You wouldn't like some of the fish indigenous to Britain. We got trout. We got mackerel. We got kippers. They're fishy fish.
No,
Wouldn't like a fish
probably
pie.
not. I would if it didn't taste like fish. Then it would be fine. My parents,
But the slight problem with that
well, my
is that it is
parents used
fish.
to hide fish in dishes and everything, so that the fish taste wasn't that obvious. And I did wolf that down. Fish balls are nice, and they don't taste like fish. Same with fish pudding. They don't taste like fish either. I did try fish cakes, but they had too much fish in them and tasted too much fish. I was really disappointed in that.
I tried fish cakes, but unfortunately they
Well, I
tasted
hoped
like
it would
fish.
be like fish balls or fish pudding or something, which doesn't taste like fish.
Oh dear. I like fish so much. I
Oh
have.
my God.
I have sushi. If I can get decent sushi, then I'll have it. But mostly sushi is bad in most places.
Picture Edward Monk's Scream. That is basically my face right now.
Yeah, you. That sounds like absolutely your worst nightmare.
I do
you hate
try
fish.
at irregular intervals, but I can't get over the taste of fish.
Okay, Eustace. Okay, Eustace. I don't know how you got onto that, but okay.
Okay, enough of a fish rant and discussion on that. Yeah.
Right.
Back.
Aged people.
Yeah.
You should be nice to
And
them.
back to the ashes. It did take my mind to the phoenix as well.
Don't feed them fish though. The fish got bones. Can't feed them whole fish. They got no teeth.
Well, if you take the bones out, they should be good.
Yes. Debone the fish
Yeah,
for the
it
aged.
can be.
There's a really tenuous link between
Yeah.
aged people and fish.
Monatomic gold connection. Maybe that's why the Japanese live so long. But yeah, the ashes definitely take my mind to the phoenix and resurrection, and hence the circle of life, and sort of eternal life as well, even if you die and then come back.
That's true.
And also that the seventh father of the house is in, and the horn symbology is quite interesting. It's a symbol of strength and supremacy, sovereignty, and real dignity, and aggressive ferocity, and glory and everything. So it's full of life force, and of course you have the Horn of Plenty, which is literally life-giving. And when it comes to the Norse sagas, Odin tricked. Oh, who did he trick? Yeah, and a lot of creatures. But Kvasir, he was basically a son of the Aesir and the Vanir, a human, but elevated human. And he knew everything. He was basically an oracle. You could ask him anything and he had the answer. And some dwarves tricked him and killed him, and mixed his blood with honey and made a mead out of it, which they had in 3 horns. the mead of knowledge, I
yes.
think. And the one who guarded it, Odin tricked that creature. I don't remember off the top of my head what creature it was, but he was allowed one sip of each horn, and he drained each horn in one sip and then changed himself into an eagle to get away. So that brings in knowledge and wisdom that comes through the generation and with age and everything. And when you conserve your family's knowledge over centuries, there is a lot to learn there, instead of each generation having to learn
Absolutely.
everything by themselves. So yeah,
Yeah, that was a very
yeah, it was.
multi-generational household. Everything there.
It also took my mind to I think that is a Christian concept of the seventh son of the seventh son having special abilities, being extra blessed by God. So
Yes.
yeah,
That is
yeah.
common trope. Indeed.
So there you have
Yeah.
at least 7 fathers. Was the seventh father a seventh son as well?
Yes, true. No, it's interesting themes. Definitely. I think that is about. I think that's about
I
us
think
for
so.
tonight, isn't it?
I don't really have many more points on any stories. I think the theme is exhausted for tonight, at least.
I think so. We may have some other thoughts on it at a later date, or there may be other topics that do relate to the troubles of old age.
But
yeah.
Thank
you for watching, everyone, and hope you have a nice remainder of your Sunday. I think for most of you, it is the evening now, or the night. I will say good night.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are elsewhere in the afternoon, have a good day.
As I said last week, next Sunday we will have Laurel's Cave Bomb. And the topic will be the hero's journey for both men and women, dealing with masculinity and femininity,
Yes.
connected to how that is pictured in The Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. It's going to be a very interesting show, because Laurelie has a lot of knowledge about Lord of the Rings and Jungian archetypes and many, many interesting things.
I did post all of her links on Twitter and on Telegram, so please check out her work. If you do have any questions you want answered, you can ask them on Entropy. Also, that will be our season finale. After that, we will take a little break for the summer. Yeah.
Yes, it will. Yes. We are going to have a little break.
Yeah.
A bit of a summer holiday.
I will I can repost all of her links again on Telegram and her chat with Jared George and John. I still can't remember the rest of his name. This is embarrassing. Yeah, and I will also post that on Twitter, so that anyone want to check out her work over the next week, please do. I think it is very interesting and much food for thought.
Hmm.
Uh,
Illuminatus wants in on this discussion of Lord of the Rings and Jungian archetypes. Be sure to join in. We shall be
yeah.
looking at the chat. We usually do.
There might be a story
Yeah.
or two coming up in during the summer, getting our backlog fixed.
Yes. We got a few from season 1. I might have to re-record some
Yeah,
things with some decent
I still
audio.
have a few left as well, so we will try to get that done. So we won't abandon you completely,
Mhm.
but I don't think there will be any streams on it. Basically, just putting up the
Yes.
stories.
Yes, Eustace, we're aware of the
Yeah.
unfortunate acronym. 'Tis what it is. You don't realize until.
Well, the name
though.
is good. No, we
weren't
don't
thinking along
think
those
in
lines.
degenerate lines like that. We are respectable women, so the name of the channel is good.
Indeed.
That the acronym ends up being a bit unfortunate is not our fault. Yeah,
A minor downside.
definitely don't take responsibility for it though. Because I definitely do
Hmm.
like the
No.
name of the channel. So yes, that is us for this week.
Well,
Have a wonderful week till we see you again, and a wonderful Sunday, however much is left of it. So good night, everyone.
indeed.